interesting. A few weeks ago, on the way to giving the Sunday talk, I overheard the tail end of a person who was reading a story about an experience of another. And it just blew me away, because this is a book. Unfortunately, I didn't get the title or the author or the name of anything or anybody, but I recognized that this was a person that was talking about his or her immortal experience and what it was like. Didn't know if the person was alive or not that had written the story, but it was so exciting. And it's just like, okay, it's out there. It's out there. And here was being read on NPR. Yeah, very, very powerful. So this morning, first of all, welcome. I'm glad you're all here. Moving into the new year with some powerful thoughts, powerful energies. I was thinking on January 1st, we had a new moon, the new moon to Capricorn, and we had like 4 or 5 planets lined up in Capricorn. Very auspicious sign that it's going to be a challenging year for us, but progressive and advancing. So that we can question ourselves and look at our physical body, emotional body, mental body, and try to recognize where are the weaknesses in these 3 bodies, so that once they're integrated and really have the health to sustain the outpouring light that comes in from higher realms, we can hold this light and love and power like a chalice. But if our physical, emotional, mental bodies have leakages or cleavages, then we're going to have problems. Either way, problems or not, we can take the problem and use it as a building block to strengthen that particular body. We just need to concentrate, pay attention to what that weakness is, and work on it. But the way we're going to work on it is through our intuition, or to talk with somebody whose intuition is there, and use higher knowledge, wisdom, how to resolve that problem. If we don't use higher knowledge and wisdom to resolve a problem, then how can I say it? It's like there's an intrusive factor, and that intrusive factor is fear. So we don't want fear to overwhelm us if we recognize and acknowledge that there is a weakness in the physical, emotional, or mental body. So we're going to bypass any fear by taking our consciousness into the higher mind, or later into the intuitional plane of consciousness. And from that plane of consciousness, we're going to observe, just like being in the penthouse in our meditation this morning, we can see all and recognize all. Then the intuition gives us answers how to resolve that problem. So once the problem is resolved, our chalice is more brilliant, more radiant, and nothing is going to leak out of the physical, emotional, mental body. We'll be able to hold the light and love and power that comes into our body. When that occurs is when we then become soul infused. We no longer have any leaks. Okay? Okay. And also, this is just taking me right into the talk this morning on wholeness and the DNA, and you'll see why in a minute. So this morning's talk, first of all, it's not a feel-good talk. It is going to challenge you, not as much as what I initially had planned on doing, as I was putting together all these crazy ideas about the DNA. I got more and more excited, and then I realized that it's going to be over the head of most people, because I've done a lot of studying on this, and you really need a foundation. So we're going to have a foundation this morning, and then later we can play around with the idea of going beyond the DNA. So anyway, hopefully that the talk this morning will give us some ideas to think about, and we won't just walk out and go through the front door or go upstairs or wherever you are when you're watching this video and forget about what you listen to, but it will really evoke some, more thinking. Some scientists and even esotericists have investigated the holographic pattern of cells. The holographic pattern of cells. And in their investigation, they have concluded, both scientists and esotericists, esotericists to me are scientists not only of today's world, but of the future as well. And they have concluded that every cell contains a copy of the master DNA imprint. Your DNA is what makes us uniquely us. It's that double helix that your genes are made of. Okay, so that's the DNA. Some esotericists and a few scientists also believe that we have a holographic brain. And if that is so, it suggests, they believe, a parallel universe. Now, this is the talk that I really wanted to develop this morning, and realize that, it would just cause confusion. But I have done a lot of study with it, and I can tell you my own beliefs in a capsule form, very condensed form, and that is, it's not a parallel universe the way science fiction writes about regarding a parallel universe. To us, the parallel universe is the spiritual triad. The spiritual triad is our parallel universe. And this is where the holographic brain comes in. So that's all I'm going to share about it this morning. Just putting out a little carrot out there, but we will talk about it someday. If not in a Sunday talk, then in a class. What we want to realize is that within each action, each word, each thought, there is a blueprint. So think about this. Within each word, each action, each thought, there is a blueprint. We could call it a DNA blueprint. So this is going a little bit beyond your scientific textbook. So keep your mind open. It's very provable, actually. But you're going to have to prove it. That each thought, each action, each word that we express builds up the whole that we are. That each word, each action, each thought builds up the whole of what we are. If our voice or the energy pattern of our thoughts and actions are analyzed, we're going to find that there are patterns, and that these patterns are like holograms that exactly reflect the human ego. I'm speaking slowly so it will really sink in, and you'll have time to take your notes and really think about this. The other day, in my studying about the holographic brain, I was reading that a pine tree that became extinct 16 million years ago, I think about 16 million years ago, that was not yesterday, okay? So we can't even imagine 16 million years ago. This pine tree that became extinct that long ago has now reappeared. Its location is a highly guarded secret. Because somebody will go down and chop it down, you know that, okay? But the important point is this: that blueprint stays in existence for a very long time, whether it is visible or invisible. And when the forces of light determine it is time for the form to reappear, then it comes back into effect, whether positive or negative in expression. So we can compare this pine tree of 16 million years ago becoming extinct, now coming back as reincarnation, as the reincarnation of our words and our actions and our thoughts that make up who we are. Very, very powerful thought, isn't it? So let me explain something first. However, that the human ego is not the human soul. I know you know that, but it's important to define it in our talk this morning. So you want to separate out the two, that the human ego is very different from the human soul. They are not one and the same. And the next thing you want to remember is this: the DNA is not the archetype of your body. The DNA is not the archetype of your body. Now, the human ego, we know, is a combination of matter and spirit, right? Right. Okay, good. A little affirmation out there. The human ego tends to become a human soul. Okay, the human ego tends to become a human soul. This means that the DNA is considered the ego of the body. The DNA is considered the ego of the body. Or that it is a reflection. Now here, if you haven't studied the Ageless Wisdom about the permanent atoms, you're going to be lost. But use your imagination a little bit and think of atoms as recording devices. The DNA is considered the ego of the body, or it is a reflection of the permanent atoms in physical matter. That's the DNA. Let me repeat this, that the DNA is a reflection of the permanent atoms in physical matter. To learn more about permanent atoms, if you really have an interest in this, you can study The New Dimensions of Healing by Torquem Serdarian. The level of matter. Now here's another catchy phrase. The level, think of level, right? The level of matter that spirit is focused on and identified with is the ego. Again, let me repeat, the DNA is not the archetype of the body. The DNA is the ego of the body, the reflection of the physical permanent atoms in matter. The ego has the characteristics of all that the human soul has, except this: the ego is not pure. And most of the time it is controlled by the matter it is identified with. Matter is the recorder of all the experiences that we have had through many, many incarnations, many, many lifetimes. Are you excited to hear this information? What are we going to do with it? Okay, I'll tell you in a minute. It is egoic experiences that cause us to see or initially identify with matter. And in time, known as Maya, glamour, and illusion. So as our human ego is returning lifetime after lifetime after lifetime, certain holographic patterns take place, whether positive or negative. And the ego begins to, along with the human soul, then begins not only to identify with the glamour or with illusion and ultimately Maya, it believes it with its whole being that this is reality. This is what it is. Now, the higher the identification of your spirit, the higher the experiences your spirit has for its own use. I'm going to repeat that. The higher the identification of your spirit, the higher the experiences your spirit has for its own use. So, for example, our meditation that we had earlier this morning, of those various experiences that someday we will have that will make us immortal. Now, if we take this concept of immortality and go back and repeat this statement that the higher the identification of our spirit, the higher the experiences the spirit has for its own use, then you see how that works? Okay, good. However, during its evolution, our spirit gradually discards all those experiences which do not fit the archetype found within its essence. So don't let my example confuse you about immortality. That's not included here. It is talking about those, the illusion and the glamour and the Maya through many, many incarnations that the ego plus the human soul begins to identify with. As our consciousness evolves and really functions in the light of the higher mind, and finally into the whole of the spiritual triad, then in that process, spirit is gradually discarding all those experiences which do not fit in with the archetype of the essence of who we are. What is the archetype, you ask? I know some of you are, and some of you saying, no, I know. But let's go over it again. The archetype in our human soul is a model of progressive action, perfection. A model of progressive perfection. So here we have the archetype, and then we have the DNA. The DNA, on the other hand, is conditioned by what? By our life circumstances and by our incarnations. The human soul is the spirit plus the collected experiences which are in harmony with the patterns of the spirit. I'm going to repeat that. The human soul is the spirit plus the collected experiences which are in harmony with the patterns of the spirit. These experiences then are used as tools to solve problems of life on each level where your soul is focused. So this is why I was saying earlier, talking about the new moon of Capricorn and all these planets lined up in Capricorn, and how we want to see our weaknesses, but resolve them through intuition. We don't want to resolve them through Maya, glamour, and illusion, which most people will have a tendency to do. And if you're saying, but my intuitional body is not built, well, it's okay, because we have the ageless wisdom teaching to resource, particularly New Dimensions of Healing by Torquem Serderian. Now, the holograms of thoughts, words, and actions of the ego, the holograms of thoughts, words, and actions of the ego are different from the holograms of the thoughts, words, and actions of the human soul. The difference is that the hologram of egoic activities are centripetal, and the holograms of the soul are centrifugal, which means centripetal is self-centered, and centrifugal is selfless or other-oriented. So that's the difference between these two holograms. Also, the holograms of egoic activities are images of the patterns of the matter side of a person, whereas the holograms of the soul are the archetypal patterns of the spirit. Are you with me? Okay. Thus, we are both matter and spirit combined. We are, as a human being, we are a mixture of these two kinds of patterns, which agree with or conflict with each other, creating what we call human life in all its aspects or facets. And in each facet, we see the same mixture of both holograms. This kind of reminds me of, you have a little angel on your left shoulder and a little angel on your right shoulder, right? Darkness and light. Spiritual evolution. And that's what we're really interested here. Spiritual evolution is accomplished by the spirit detaching from its identification, building a focus of experience on the higher mental plane. This is so important. If you don't hear anything the rest of the year or absorb anything from any more Sunday talks except for this talk, and you apply the concepts and ideas and integrate them into your life and really make it become, these ideas become viable, you will be in the upper 3 percentile of humanity in terms of light and love and power, in terms of immortality. So I'm going to repeat this again. Spiritual evolution is accomplished by the spirit detaching from its identification, building a focus of experience on the higher mental plane, and using it as the base from which to lift itself and penetrate into its pure beingness in the intuitional plane with all its distilled experiences. And this is evolution. The pattern of the human soul, you must know this, the pattern of the human soul is harmonious. Oh, there's so much I'd like to share. It's like time is of essence. Okay, so what does it mean? What does this mean? The pattern of the human soul is harmonious. Okay, I will share a little bit here. In the teachings, we have been told that the physical body, emotional body, mental body has a note, a musical note. We've also been told the soul has its note. Okay. The pattern of the human soul is harmonious only when we allow the note of each of these three bodies and the note of the soul resonate. Let me put it, I've got to do this over again. When we take the three notes, physical, emotional, mental notes of the personality, when they resonate to the note of the human soul, that resonance is going to be in perfect harmony. The same as if the three notes of the personality are not sounded in its purity, but through dissonance, then the effect or the resonance is going to be dissonant. Okay, so when you engage in meditation, we talk about alignment, right? The importance of alignment. We relax the physical body, then we move into the emotional body, then into the mental body, and then finally into the light and love and power of the higher mind. And eventually, in time, we fuse these lower bodies with the higher body. So this fusion process is the process of creating harmony in our environment as a result of the sounding of the note of the human soul. And then, ultimately, in a more advanced manner, the note of the solar angel. So we're either an instrument that's perfectly in tune with our soul, or in dissonance with our soul. The human soul itself has a pure resonance with something greater than itself. And do you know what that is? It's a cosmic magnet. It has a pure resonance with the cosmic magnet, also known as the galactic soul, having the visible galaxy as its body, with invisible vehicles behind the visible galaxy. So I'm not going to go any further with that, but just okay. But it's to stretch, our thinking a little bit here. Why? Well, I just had this thought. If we take our meditation from this morning and really experience it in real form, and we begin to touch gradually and then more and more and more, increasingly more, experience of immortality, then we're going to want to know. Because if not, your concrete mind is going to bring you back into identification with the physical body. I mean, I've had these experiences, not so much out there with the galactic soul, but enough to know in those first few miserable years of these experiences, fear abounds. It's not that the soul has fear, not at all. What happens is the concrete mind, the collection of experiences from various incarnations that now have us totally identified with our DNA, think, we can't go out and visit another planet. We can't go out there and visit Orion, where the cosmic heart is, the galactic soul is. You know, there's something wrong with this. I have nothing to identify with, and we get slammed back into our DNA. So it is a gradual process. So this meditation this morning is vital, and we will have meditations like this in our conference coming up in March, by the way. Okay. Thus, in each of us as a human soul, the galactic soul is present. There's our archetype, the essence of our human soul. Eventually, the galactic soul manifests its complexity through the human soul, and now the human soul is present in the galactic soul as its womb to grow. The discovery of the different patterns of expressions, words and actions and so forth creates all those methods by which we build measures to evaluate one another's lives. Oh, it's so all the time. These measures are actually applied to discover the soul or egoic pattern in human expression. This is something, if you're a therapist or a counselor of some sort, that would be invaluable to help you in, what is the word, you're assessing, your client, or as a parent to a child, their child. This is why we try to open people's awareness of the interrelationship of spirit and matter. In other words, the expression of the ego and the expression of the human soul. The difference between such use is that ego measurement is always done by the standards of the ego. And this is where most people are, in their evaluations, in their opinions, in their deductions, is they evaluate by the standards of their ego. But the soul measurement always considers the standards of the greater whole. And specifically the standards of the galactic soul, which is reflected in our human soul. What is important here for us to realize is that we exist in all our expressions as a complete whole. They are DNA, either egoic or archetypal, our soul, which will create our next vehicles of manifestation. So we are either going to come back as our DNA, all those many, 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 many incarnations, that are recorded in our permanent atoms, equaling the DNA, or the archetype, the essence of our soul. If it is an egoic manifestation, it means the person did not become a soul yet. And his or her vehicles are subject to various pressures to come into harmony with the galactic pattern. Pain and suffering, trial and error. But if it is a soul manifestation, the created vehicles will be in harmony with the patterns of the galactic soul and will assist the human soul to further expand his resonance with the deeper layers of the galactic soul. This is how an initiate or a master whose vehicles are transfigured with no darkness existing in them comes into being. Darkness is a symbolic word meaning inharmonious conditions existing in and between vehicles. You know, I think I'm going to have to stop here. I think you have enough to work with. Okay. But you see why? I decided not to go into too much into the holographic brain. Yeah, there's so much there. Anyway, it's a powerful concept and very exciting. To me, it just brings all of the teaching into a perspective of why meditation is important, why working on ourselves is important, so that we can evolve, not just talk about evolution, but we can really evolve and finally move into that archetypal expression of the galactic soul as a human soul.